you everyone for joining. Welcome to the last session of the Global MedTech Regulatory Trends True Quality Summit series. That is a mouthful. If you missed the previous sessions about relations with regulatory bodies, you can watch the recordings on demand. We're excited to have you join us for this presentation, Making Headway Despite the Turbulence, Regulatory Requirements Quality in Your QMS. This session is going to run for about 35 minutes with 10 minutes or so allotted at the end for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat or in that Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom screen there. And at the end, we're going to try to get through as many as we can. And Joanne here is going to answer questions too along the way if she sees those. And like I was saying, today we've got Joanne LeBrun, who's going to be presenting. Joanne has been designing and implementing quality systems, managing clinical trials, leading regulatory submission projects to help medical device companies with market access for their products worldwide for more than 2 decades. Wow. She's also attends.
I am that old.
Oh, no, I've been in it for a while too. It's just when you say it that way. She also attends and conducts audits on behalf of clients for local and FDA center inspectors and notified bodies for ISO and MDSAP certifications. Joanne received her MBA in Industrial Management degree from Carnegie Mellon University and has a master's degree in music from Rice University. How cool is that? Joanne currently serves as the VP of Quality Systems at MDC Associates Incorporated, which is a regulatory and quality consulting firm and CRO specializing in IVDs and is based north of Boston. She's also been sitting in an IVDR certification audit for the past 3 days. So she is full of fresh knowledge and rearing to go to talk about this. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Everybody, I will make time for questions at the end. If you want to ask questions in the stream of things, I'll try to incorporate them. If we do run out of time, on the presentation, which is in the handout, is my email address, and I will try to answer any questions that you have. So, you know, if there's a bigger scope and you need a little bit of help in things, we can discuss that. But if you just have questions, I'll try to answer your questions as I can. And as Nikki said, I'm fresh off of an IVDR audit, which went very well, by the way. So we're very happy about that. And so I learned a lot, and I'm kind of ready to talk about it. So let me go ahead and share my screen, then do the slideshow, because sometimes that makes a difference. Can everybody, Nikki, can you see my slideshow?
Yep, I see it.
Great. All right, super. I am from Boston. I do talk quickly. I'm going to try not to talk so fast, but if anybody finds that I'm talking too quickly, tell me to slow down. But there's a lot to talk about, and let's get started. So I'm going to talk about really IVDR specifically today. As we all know, IVDR and MDR are very similar. So a lot of these things apply across the board. The big difference, obviously, is performance evaluation versus clinical evaluation. But, you know, medical devices have a little bit more things to be concerned with than IVDs. However, the requirements are still the same. So in this session, there we go. What I'm going to be talking about are key dates, which I'm sure you all know, so I can pour through those pretty quickly. The transitional provisions that are in place, which is what we got to be concerned with right this minute. Adapting your implementation, the post-implementation path, and then the audits, what you can expect for audits and how that will go. So to jump right into it, key dates and extensions. So as you know, the IVDR was implemented and in force on May 26, 2022. I myself also had a little bit of confusion as what exactly did that mean? So what that means is that the transitional provisions that are explained in Article 110 of the IVDR need to be in place. Yes, now. That's actually what it means. And so we do need to do those, and I'm going to talk about those in a quick second on the transitional provisions. It also means that if your product becomes or is a Class A product in accordance with the IVDR, which means it's self-certified, you do need to register that now. You can't just ride the IVDD. You need to make sure that you register your product as self-certified. It's the same way as we did with the self-certified products under IVDD, going through authorized representative. Also, any new products that come about, So if you want to release a product to the market now, anytime after May 26th of this year, they need to be CE certified through the IVDR, or if self-certified, also done through the IVDR. So there were some exciting things that happened. COVID has been a drag for all of us, but I think there's been some positives that have come out of it as well. And one of them is the parliamentary extensions. And so there was a parliamentary extensions that were put into place to allow pre-marketing submissions to be pushed out a bit. And the reason that they started with 2025, I don't know whose grandma's birthday is on May 26th, but it's a magical date. So somebody's grandma is that. But anyway, they pushed those out to 2025 because 2024 was the deadline for the MDR products. And so I think they just needed to cut themselves a break and not overwhelm all the notified bodies. So if you have a Class D product, and you can find all this out in the IVDR, you have until May 26, 2025 to have your CE certificate in place, not apply, have it in place. Wow, what does that mean? That means a year at least. If Class D products are kind of a big deal, I'd say a year and a half is when you should submit to your notified body. What does that mean? That means like 2 years in advance, you should start contracting with your notified body. I'll get there, but some calendar dates kind of spinning through your head. Yeah, that means like next year you need to start to do that for Class C products. And I'm sure you're thinking in your head, if you are a manufacturer of Class D products, they don't even know what they're going to do for Class D products. You're absolutely correct. But by the time it all comes up, hopefully everything will be situated, like the lot release testing and all of that sort of stuff. Still kind of under work. Class C products, if your product is a Class C product, you need to have your CE certificate. I can't stress that enough, by 2026, by grandma's birthday on 2026. And then for Class B, you've got till 2027. But that doesn't mean we can all sit back and relax until that time comes, because there's a lot to do, as I'm sure your head is probably spinning. If you're ahead of it, kudos to you. Some people are ahead. I just went through an IVDR audit. They did great. And they were ahead of it, but not everybody is ahead of it. I'm a procrastinator. I'm sure there are others as well. So there's the transitional. Thank you so much. Perfect. Just leave it right there. Yeah, that's perfect. Transitional provisions. It's the beauty of working from home. Or Article 10 of the IVDR. If your product complies with the IVDD and there are no significant changes, you got to define what significant means, but form, fit, function, and is always a good rule. And the product design or intent and purpose hasn't changed, then you can ride out those certificates through the parliamentary extensions that I talked about in the last slide. Your IVD certificate is valid. You can still operate for the most part under the IVDD, except for the transitional provisions. And as I said, also the self-certifications still stay valid as well, because there's no certificate. That's actually a big deal. There's no certificate. It took me a while to kind of figure all that out. So if you look at the regs only, you'll see that 26 May, grandma's birthday on 2024 is the deadline for some products, and then 2025 is the deadline for other products. That's no longer true. Just so you know that those deadlines are no longer the way. So the transitional provisions, there's a couple of things that you need to put in place now. There's 2 slides for these things. And again, you're going to get the slides as a handout by attending. Post-market surveillance, big concept, have a procedure, have a plan. You got to tie in your PMPF if you're also medical device people. That's PMCF in your world, but you have to have a PMPF plan, and you have to have your PSERF if you have Class C and Class D products. I personally like to exempt yourself in writing from the PSERF if you're only going to have Class B products. I know there are a lot of you out there, but you need to have a procedure. And I need to also stress that you need to have a plan. Bizarrely, you're getting points for plans during this whole transition. So you need to have a plan for all of those things. You need to have a procedure, or at least recognition of market surveillance. That one's a little bit nebulous because you're not doing market surveillance. Others are doing surveillance of you. However, if somebody comes to you and wants information, a member state or a competent authority, comes to you and they want information, you need to respond. So you should probably have some knowledge and plan for the market surveillance. What is a plan? A plan is a protocol. A plan is a written plan, or can be your procedure, can be your SOP. So there are some options there. And then you absolutely need to have vigilance and notification per the IVDR, not per the IVDD. Now, that time is now. So that definitely needs to come into play as well. One of the interesting things about notification that I totally missed, I'm sure other people have missed it, is that you need to have a provision in your quality system for bankruptcy. Not to be saved if you have bankruptcy, but if you have products in the EU and you go bankrupt or your company dissolves, you need to have a plan in place. You don't have to say what it is. You just have to say you have to do it. That has all of your records available in perpetuity. I know I freaked out to the competent authorities in the member states that have your products. And I know in IVD land, there's a lot of shelf life going on. We all have shelf life, right? Reagents have shelf lives and things like that. And it doesn't matter if there's shelf life. It's a liability thing. And so you just need to say in a procedure, one line, if we dissolve, if we have bankruptcy, we will make sure our records are available. That's all you got to say. But you do have to have a plan if something like that occurs. So I digress, but that was an interesting thing that came up that I thought. And so when you have changes, I would work it through the change control personally. And your notification of significant changes needs to be in compliance with the IVDR, and your vigilance, including UDAMED. I know they're behind, but including UDAMED, you need to have that prepared as well. I think I have UDAMED on my very next slide. Yes, that's coming up too. Thank you so much, Daryl. Because I've got an implementation thing coming up. Look at that. You are all over it, my friend. There is registration of economic operators. Also needs to be done. The way I typically am doing it, or MDC is doing it, is to make sure that you have a UDAMED procedure. I can't do the math right now, but 4 out of 6, 2 out of 3, okay, 67% of that procedure is UDAMED is gonna, UDAMED is gonna, UDAMED is gonna. So the way I've kind of written it is that, these are the things that are planned. And then as different things get released, then they're released. The economic operator registration is in there. So you gotta do it. So that absolutely needs to be done. One interesting thing is the basic UDI-DI. In order to register your devices or do anything else regulatory, you do need a basic UDI-DI. Oh my gosh, was this confusing for me? There's a great YouTube video from GS1. If you guys are clients of GS1, or even if you're not, I'm happy to send it along, that describes the differences there. The basic UDI has no labeling impact whatsoever, but it tends to be a regulatory thing, and it describes your product families. So it's not on any of your labeling, but you do need to have it, and you do need to have it for regulatory purposes. So you want to start to think about your basic UDI-DI. Basic UDI-DI, at least from GS1, I'm not selling their services, but it's who I've used, has your company prefix, a code that you assign for your product family, and then a 2-digit code, classification code to make it unique, that GS1 will create for you. So in case I have a COVID assay and you have a COVID assay, it's going to be unique anyway, and we both have different company prefixes. Anywho, that definitely needs to be established as well. It's not that big of a deal. I was really surprised that, like, oh, I have this, I get to control this, or my client does. That's absolutely true. So there's that as well. So there's that needs to get implemented. And then finally, as I said before, applying with the designated IVDR notified body, so that you can get in with them. Here's the thing that's kind of a drag for us IVD people, is that there still are only 6 notified bodies. There are others in the pipeline, but there are 6 that are designated through the IVDR. I know for a fact that 2, if not 3, are not taking clients right now, depending on what you do. If you certain things you might be able to squeeze in. So now that leaves us with like 3, and they're really, really busy. and we want to get our contract ready so that they can look at our technical file, so they can do our audits and all of those things. They're scheduling way far out right now. I heard a statistic that BSI, again, not selling for BSI, but they have 70% of the market share. And I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I think it's just because they're the only ones who are available and have their collective act together. So I know there are other notified bodies. Please, if you're with a notified body, don't send me hate mail. I know you're trying, and I know you're getting there, and I know everybody's trying to open up the market, but it is very challenging. So I would get ready on that. I'm going to talk about that at the end of this presentation, about what audits happen and kind of just some helpful hints about choosing your notified body. Well, I'll talk about it at the end so that I don't get all out of sync here. So implications to your implementation. So now we're off of transitional provisions. You got that all situated by May, or maybe tomorrow, whatever you're going to do, and you're getting all that stuff together. What else do you need to do? Well, I'm sorry, my friends, it's a lot. I don't know that they're all new procedures, particularly. A lot of them are updates or revisions. If you already had a technical file procedure, for example, update it for a technical documentation procedure. If you already have essential requirements checklist, update it to the GS&PR. I call it GS&PR. Y'all can call it whatever you wish. General safety and performance requirements. And so those two things need to get updated. One little bit of information that I've received from auditors is I used to think the GS&PR, when I wanted to go ahead and commercialize a device, I was going to go through the GS&PR and make sure all the essential requirements were met. Actually, auditors are starting to look for that really early in the process, like at design input, so that you're designing around the right thing. It totally makes sense to me when they finally brought it up to me. But at the beginning, I was like, no, that's crazy. So you might want to try to eke that up in your design process and at least draft your GS&PR early, and have a procedure for it, have a checklist for it, have it all typed out. It's not that hard to do. And also technical documentation SOP. So you know all the things that need to be in your technical documentation when you go to submit. One thing that I think is smart, if you have many product families, is go ahead and submit one, get some feedback, and then you can make all the rest of your technical documentation match that. It's going to be cheaper. You do have to pay every time you have to ask questions of your notified body. So I'd kind of consider what that strategy is going to be, and maybe eke back, if your company can afford it, eke back your timeline so you can get in early. Maybe all of the people listening right now are already in. So 7 at notified bodies. Thank you so much, Christina. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I took the BSI guys word for it. I should have checked myself. I do know there are some other notified bodies that are in designation process. I've talked to them myself, and I know more are coming. I also know some people dropped out, and we all know who those are. So that happened as well. There's the whole PEP, PER. I'm not going to say pepper. I'm not going to do it. So there's the performance evaluation plan, performance evaluation report. I like to do an SOP around it that says, this is what I'm going to do. You want to have a performance evaluation plan. Your plan should come as early as they possibly can. You're getting points for plans. So I would definitely do that, but I would have a procedure for that. I kind of already mentioned the PMPF, the PMS, and the PSER for class C and D on the other slide for transitional provisions, but I'm putting them here as well because, of course, all that stuff sort of flows together, sort of, kind of, they're relational. But there are those as well. Your quality manual is going to have to be updated, of course, because your regulatory requirements have changed. Depending on who you are and how slick you all are, I would definitely recommend not listing the regulatory requirements every single place in your quality system. Why? They make a change, you got to go update it. So I would recommend putting it in one place and say, this is our regulatory requirements, then go throughout. The gentleman that I talked with BSI this week, that's who I was with, had absolutely said that was the way to go, and that was acceptable, at least in his book. Some people don't like it, but I think it's way easier. I've heard some auditors with a little bit more power say, well, you're gonna have to update that procedure anyway, so don't shortcut yourself because you're not going to get to that procedure if you didn't update it. I don't know about that. So, if you have good change control, you'll make sure that you change everything up. Quality manual, I digress. Labeling control SOP, heck yeah, you need to update some things. There's some things that you need to make sure. Don't forget the fact that there's a new 15223 for symbols. I know that came out a while ago. You gotta get that implemented as well. One interesting thing about labeling that I also didn't catch, because when I was reading through the label requirements, I was like, yeah, this is just the first paragraph for the labeling requirements. Here's the umpteen, I think there's like 30 different bullets of all the things that need to be in your labeling. Interesting fact is at the end of that introductory paragraph that I skipped, that if you have a website, you must put your IFUs on your website. You must. I'm sorry. And so depending on your facility and your organization, sometimes the support that you need to put in place for that to make sure that it gets up on the website, and when you change your labeling, that it gets up there and you don't have a disconnect and all that sort of stuff. If you have more than a few SKUs, you just multiply that effort out. So there's labeling control that needs to be done, translation of labeling, and interestingly, translation of field actions. Didn't think of that before. That was a new one for me. Making sure that the translation of field actions, or your field actions, are indeed translated through your certified translator, depending on which member states you're going into. So I thought that was kind of an interesting finding, or an interesting discussion that I had this week as well. There's another slide. This is, again, the implementation, right? So there's purchasing controls. Quality agreements get a really big emphasis here, particularly with the regulatory responsible persons. I tried to kind of make that like broad, because of course there's authorized representatives, there's importers, there's your sponsors, if you're an MD-SAP company, there's your distributors. All of those people, you need to have agreements. I have not been in an audit where the authorized representative or one distributor agreement hasn't been reviewed. It's gonna happen. So make sure you have that together. There's the UDI SOP that's coming someday before we all retire. But there is that. And I talked about the basic UDI, DI. I sometimes will blend it in with UDAMED there, sometimes not. Depends on who you are and how you do things, but they're related, sort of. So there's also that UDAMED SOP, but that came back in the transitional provisions. Management review SOP, some more stuff that you got to talk about. In your management review. Internal audit SOP, you got to audit for the IVDR, so you might as well get that in there. We tend to do a checklist for internal audits that lists like all the regulatory requirements, so that we're sure we cover them all. And so, oh my gosh, that's a big one. For placing IFUs online, you need to include prior revisions. Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Or search by lot number. Daryl, thank you so much. That's absolutely correct. So I mean, think about it, everybody. You put on your IFU, your next lot has a different IFU, and you know you're updating your IFU. So you need to be sure that you have IFUs for all your different lots that are out in the market. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that, but you absolutely need to consider that as well. I believe medical devices, it counts as well, but I'd have to check the MDR to make sure it's there. I'm pretty certain it is, because the MDR, the IVDR was written from the MDR. So Yazan, I hope I'm saying your name right. I do believe that's the same as well, but I would look at it. You know what I'm talking about. It's that big bullet. It goes down to AA, AC, AD, AF, whatever that thing is. Look at that top paragraph and it'll talk about the website right there. And field actions are field safety corrective acts, notices, technical bulletins, anything that you need to get out to the end user needs to be translated depending on which member state you sold into. So that's what I meant by field actions. And then the last thing is the record availability. I put the bankruptcy dissolution thing in here so that you can remember that part as well. It was no big deal. It was a minor finding. We can fix it easy, but you know, you might as well get ahead of it and try not to have any findings if you can handle it. I know I am a geek like that. I think I was talking about the checklist. So with the checklist, you do want to make sure we do a checklist just because when you're doing the internal audit, which we do a lot of, by the way, but when you do an internal audit, you're not going to write down everything you look at, and you're certainly not going to mention all the good stuff. And so the checklist helps me and in our endeavors to make sure that you're covering all the regs. So they're not like, well, why didn't you cover this? Well, I just didn't put a statement in there for it. So it's kind of a nice little double check. If you have questions about that, contact me and we can talk that through, and I can kind of tell you what we do there. Totally digress, but you know, might as well tell you what we do. So now the post-implementation pass. So you've done all the stuff with your quality system. You're ready to go. What do you need to do? So you definitely need to define, and this came up, you need to define the market life of your products. That is not the shelf life. That is the market life, right? You keep your validation and your design history file documents and records through the market life of your product. Well, apparently it has to be available to the competent authorities till the end of time. However, they want to understand what that is so that you know that you understand what it is, so that when you talk about market life, you have that. You want to draft your declaration of conformity, DOC, declaration of conformity. Interestingly, you cannot sign it yet because you don't have your certificate yet. If you sign it, you get a finding. Crazy, right? So it has to be in draft. Don't sign it. Don't sign it. So there was that. That was kind of an interesting thing that came up. You want to update your technical documentation. Yeah, that's a project. Yeah, that's a lot to do. And for those of us who had Class B products, it is a lot, because did you really keep technical documentation? Good if you did. Good for you. I know a lot of people really didn't, or maybe kept the key things that the authorized representatives needed, but not all the things that were in the regs. But when you go to submit your technical documentation to your notified body, they're going to do a completeness check. They're not even going to look at it, just like FDA does. They're not going to look at it unless everything is in there. And if everything isn't in there, they're going to send it back and say, yeah, not yet. You got to do this. And they're going to charge you for it. So you want to make sure that your technical documentation is complete, is thorough. There's no inferences to be made, just like 510K or just like FDA. You guys probably have higher classification products than just 510K, but it's just like that. One thing that a lot of IVD companies did, at least in my life, where these are the things in our technical documentation, and this is where they reside. That's fine. Please make sure they reside there. Please make sure you really have them, but you're going to have to put it together in some sort of a submission for your notified bodies, obviously. So there's that. And yes, you need to update your GS and PR. Shouldn't be too big of a deal, but you're going to have to do it, and they're going to want to look at it and make sure that all of those things are taken care of. There's 2 slides for this as well. You need to complete, before you get your audit, you need to complete your PMS and your PSER if you have a high enough classification of product. You need to have your plan before you do that. You need, I didn't put on here, but an added bonus for listening to me right now, you need to have a plan for your label updates. That gets you by. You get points for plans. Go fig. You need to have at least your performance evaluation plan done, but it would be nice if you already submitted your technical documentation. There's no way you cannot have this done. Your performance evaluation plan, your performance evaluation report, and your post-market performance follow-up plan. You're probably not going to have much. Post-market performance follow-up is one of those things. It's like, when do we do that? And I kind of have a classic example, and that is, you have an intended use for your product. It's a medical device example, but it's okay. You have an intended use for your product. I'm not even going to give you the example, actually. And you have a customer calls in and they say they're using it differently. Well, it's not supposed to be used for that. Now, I'm testing my goldfish on it, different, but whatever it may be. Do you want to support that in your claims or do you not? And do you need to discourage that client maybe using it RUO or something like that? And that may be an example where PMPF could come in, or, maybe a specification needs to change and you need to redo validation, or the societal opinion of your product has changed. So those kind of things happen in IVDs, right? So those are kind of some examples of when it's going to happen. I don't know. I haven't really run into it yet. I have run into the PMCF in the medical device world, but I've not really run into that yet. But you still have to have that and a plan. Your documented assignment of your PRRC. Interesting. So management rep. Some auditors will say, oh, if it's on your org chart, yeah, you've assigned your management rep. It's signed by your president, fine. Actually, for both things, I would say, because FDA is asking for this now, a documented assignment of your management representative. I, king of this company, assign that person as the management representative is sufficient. Sign off on it, acknowledge that you received it, all good. Put it on your job description, all that stuff, perfect. Have it on your org chart. For the PRC, because you can split those roles, you can split the roles for management rep as well, but because you can split the roles for the PRC, the auditors also want to see the defined roles and responsibilities for the PRC in that assignment letter. So it's not sufficient just to be on the org chart. You need to have an assignment letter. You can do both at the same time, management review and PRC, that's fine. But you need to have that documented assignment of I presume you who's listening to this as the PRC or whoever is the PRC for your organization. So have that prepared. Upload your IFUs to the website and have a plan for how you're going to upload them and do the past regs. Are you going to do it lot specific, serial number specific, whatever your plan is, to be able to have that done and perform your internal audits. I know this is not a stage 1 audit for ISO. I get it. It was checked, and it was checked. Did you do an internal audit for the IVDR? Fortunately, we did in this situation, but it will be checked. So you want to make sure that you get your internal audits done as well. I believe there's more, is there? Yep, there's more. So now comes like sort of some of the other stuff. So you want to apply with your notified body. It takes some effort to do so. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of like, it's not even paperwork anymore. It's electronic applications happening there. You want to make sure that the codes that were applied during the IVDR designation are apply to you. I have a feeling that's a little bit different in the IVDR world, but I have to look into it myself, but I'm still going to say it out loud that you kind of need to do that. Make sure it applies to you and make sure they're going to suit what you do and what you have, because they do get codes at their designation. Understand how many assessors they have, which are auditors, with the skill sets or the codes that you have. If they have one, oh, that might not be your notified body. Same thing with technical reviewers. How many technical reviewers do you have with the skill sets? Again, they get codes as well. How many do you have? You got one? Oh my gosh, this is a big product. Let's say it's C. diff, just to get out of COVID for a second. That's going to be a big deal, right? So you want to make sure that the assessors and the technical reviewers at your notified body, and I'm going to talk about audits in a second in case you're confused, have the appropriate codes and they have the right resources to be able to do your project, to take you on. And interestingly, you can apply with more than one notified body, but you can only contract with one notified body. I was confused about that. And so it's really down to the contract, not down to the application. So you can kind of see a little bit of stuff, but not much. But you can't contract with more than one. That's a new IVDR rule. You need to identify your product roster, which is a PRC still required for those legacy devices? Yes. Yes, you need to have that as a transitional provision. I'd do it. I'd do it for your IVDR audit. Now you could probably get by if you're going to go legacy devices all the way through to 2027 for your class Bs. You could ride it out, because no one's going to audit you for IVDR until you apply for your CE mark. So you're going to get away with it. But if you want to put a new product out there, they're going to look to see that it's there. So I don't know. It's not that big of a deal to do. It may be for you, Catrice. And so you might want to consider that and balance that risk out, but I'd probably do it.
And just, I was going to say real quick, just to clarify, we're talking about legacy devices that you're not doing any changes on. It's in the market. Right. You're not thinking about it.
Right. So, you're riding out your IVDD as long as you can.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you can wait for that. Yeah. And they do ask, and they do say, you know, which devices are riding out and which ones do you want to go with now? In this particular situation where I was this week, they wanted to put a product through because they had a new product. And so they wanted to be able to do that. Plus the classification of their products changed a little bit for the better, weirdly, because that's not very common in the IVD world. So yeah, so you want to identify your product roster. It really matters what you choose here, right? Like which products are you bringing through when, and which ones are you going to let be legacy until that date? And how are you going to apply for them? Again, planning is awesome. Having a written plan for it is going to be ideal. You want to update your declaration of conformity. We talked about that, and your labeling. Draft only. Do not approve it because you don't have your certification yet. They're going to check you and they're going to give you a finding if you do it any other way. So I apologize for that, but it's the fact of the matter on that one. My pleasure, Catrice. And then you need to update your technical documentation. I kind of said that twice, didn't I? But I can't stress it enough because it's a lot. And, you know, the performance evaluation is a big deal. There are a lot of IVDs, maybe not a lot of IVDs, but there are some IVDs that perhaps didn't have a clinical study associated with them. Controls, for example, right? No one's going to do a clinical study for controls. That's allowable. You got to justify it, but it is allowable. And so, you know, there's just no clinical evaluation there. There's no field trials, as it were. I know it's IVDs, but you kind of get what I mean there. So all of that needs to be thought of, and you really do need to have plans for everything by the time anybody's going to look. Interestingly, you're not going to get your IVDR certification until you get your CE certificate. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing as well, which leads me to who audits me and why, and how is this going to work and what's going on. So I've divided out finally in my head the difference between the registrar and the notified body. It's going to be one company. Let's take BSI just because, as I said, a lot of market share at the moment. But the rest of you matter too. So please don't think that you don't matter. It's just I happen to spend 3 days with one from BSI. So there's registrar capabilities and there's notified body capabilities. The registrar is ISO 13485, right? So, and MDSAP. There are 5 countries in MDSAP: United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, Brazil. Interestingly, if indeed you get MDSAP for Canada, because of course it's compulsory, and you're a manufacturer in the United States, you have to take United States as well. And if you are selling in the in Australia, you have to take Australia as well. So you don't get to choose. You can sell in Australia without having MDSAP. But if you get MDSAP for Canada's sake and you sell in Australia, you have to take Australia and your MDSAP. Kind of interesting. Thought I should push that along, and had that discussion with somebody about a year ago. Anyway, the registrar function will grant your QMS certification for ISO 13485 2016, EN ISO 13485 2016. I know, MDSAP 5 countries, and typically there are not unannounced audits. Depends on the notified body. For those of you, 70% of you probably, who are with BSI, apparently if there are grade 4 or grade 5 nonconformances in the ISO process or MDSAP process, there will maybe be unannounced audits. No, and I didn't know about that. Probably it's in your contract, but I didn't know about that. Another interesting thing, if anybody cares, is that any audit report that I'm talking about here cannot be redacted. If Saudi Arabia asks for your last ISO report, you cannot just send page 1. You cannot redact information. You have to send it in its entirety. I know that's in the contract for BSI. I don't know about other notified bodies, but I do know that that is a condition of BSI. Yes, it does. It applies. Sorry, I can see the questions. You guys can't. So Honey is asking me regarding having Canada and Australia. If you're using MDSAP, does that apply to the Japan and Brazil? And it definitely does. If you apply for MDSAP for Canada and you're selling to Brazil currently, you need to add Brazil to your country. Same with Japan. Yep, absolutely. Yep, my pleasure. So apparently, and I don't know if this is a BSI rule or if this is an all-around rule. I think it's a BSI rule. If there are major findings, BSI can just show up and do an unannounced audit. Stinks. True. Sorry. So there's that. But that's the registrar stuff. Now, if they're not designated for IVDR, can you use another body for registration? Yeah, definitely. Are you going to have a lot of audits? Yeah, definitely. So because you're going to have another audit for the IVDR. So then there's the notified body. The notified body are the people who are looking at your technical documentation. They're the people who are going to give you your CE certificate. They're the people who are going to really scour your technical documentation to make sure that you cover everything and that everything's covered and everything makes sense and everything's cohesive and there aren't any conflicts of information. because by the nature of them putting their number on your product, they are sponsoring you, they are backing you, they're putting their reputation on the line. We'll go with reputation because what I first came out with was not reputation. They're putting their reputation on the line to say this product can be sold in the EU. We've looked at this and we've verified it. We've guaranteed that. So that's why they get kind of overboard and look at a lot of different stuff in the technical documentation. I digress. So they're going to be looking at your technical documentation to be able to give you that CE certificate. But as you know, there are, which is what this whole presentation is about, quality system requirements to be able to be IVDR compliant. Right. So you have to have a quality management system compliant with the IVDR. It's not enough to be ISO compliant. Obviously, there's all that stuff that I just talked about that you need to update. That's fine for ISO. That needs to be updated for the IVDR. And if you're MDR, you got to update it for the MDR too. One interesting thing about MDR, I think that you need to list both the MDR and the IVDR in your documents of external origin, because when you read the IVDR, it says reference the MDR. However, the guy from BSI actually disagreed with me. And he had said, well, if you're ISO 9000, if you're ISO 13485, then you should have ISO 9000 on your documents of external origin. Fair thing, but I could see that other auditors may be pushing for that. So you decide what you wish to do. It distinctly say for this article or chapter or what have you, look at the MDR. So if it were my company, I'd list the MDR for that reason. It's up to you what you want to do there. Anyway, the QMS certification is for the IVDR. It's a completely different audit. They will, apparently, these notified bodies will put them together. Couldn't think of the word. Could put them together to be able to do the audit kind of all at one time. However, I have also heard, no, we won't do that. We come in and we'll do your ISO and MD-SAP together. Then we do your IVDR audit. The other interesting thing is that your ISO audit and MD-SAP audit, I might have said MDR a minute ago. I didn't mean it. I meant MD-SAP. Your ISO audit is a 3-year term. Your CE certificate and your IVDR audit is a 5-year term. So what does that mean? That means when you get your ISO audit, it's certification, surveillance. But when you get your IVDR audit, it's certification, surveillance. They're not going to really overlap very well. Every 15 years, I think, is the math I did. They're going to, oh, we have our surveillance audits, or we have our certification audit on the same year again. It's going to happen once and then not again for quite some time until they kind of circle all the way through. So you'll be up against recert at a different time than for ISO than for IVDR. Stinks, I know, sorry. Unannounced audits are mandated here. So in the other one, it's like, is it really mandated? Not so sure, but here they're mandated. Interesting fact. So they are mandated to audit your technical documentation and pretty much design and production. What I was told from BSI, again, the rest of you may be doing something different. I apologize. It's the last experience that I had. Literally, they watch their clock. And if they are not allowed on the production floor in 15 minutes, you get a finding. So you got to get them out there fast. I didn't know this was a thing until yesterday. So I would make sure that you do that. The other thing that's interesting, at least from BSI, is that the technical reviewer is not attending that audit. The technical reviewer, it's kind of weird, and I'm sorry, I think it's weird, but they have little harnesses. The auditors, the assessors have little harnesses that they wear with a tablet on it so that they can walk around and show the technical reviewer what they wish to see.
Is that because of people being remote? What?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And technical reviewers don't travel, and technical reviewers are not assessors. So they'll say, I want to see this process on the floor. And so the assessor will go out, wear his little harness, which I still think is just weird, but I haven't seen it yet. Wear his little harness, turn it on, and FaceTime with them so that they can see that process at that time. That's how BSI is doing it. Don't know how the rest of y'all are doing it, if there's any notified bodies on the call, but there is that. And then the other thing that they can do at any time is, I say for cause, it's not a thing. It's just how I think, because FDA has a for cause, right? So that's why it's in quotes. But at any time during the technical documentation review, if there's something that's funky or integrity weird or validity weird, the technical reviewer can launch an assessor to do an unannounced audit on you, which means they just show up. What else does it mean? Yeah, you got to pay for their lodging. You got to pay for the audit. It's not like the FDA, which is federally funded, but you get the benefit of paying those people for that. So those are an absolute must, and those absolutely do happen. So if you're a new company, or if you're just trying to figure this out, you don't have to switch who you're using for your ISO if you don't want to, but there will be two different audits there. And the tricky thing is, you're not going to have the same auditor, right? So they could have different problems and different issues, and there can be a disconnect if you don't kind of treat it holistically. If you're a brand new company and you're going at this right now, I like having the same company be the registrar and the notified body. It's just really nice to be able to have, but it's not absolutely necessary. So I like to bring that up because it is a consideration for everybody. You know, the assessor will show up and you're like, well, why are they here? Well, this is why they're here. Because they may do an unannounced audit if you have major findings for ISO and MDSAP, and they will do an unannounced audit always for technical documentation, and only if needed for cause. Technical documentation is before you recert. The unannounced audit is before you recert. So some notified bodies don't get to it in time because they're very behind. They are super busy right now. And so sometimes when you're about to get certified, whoop, there we go. There's our unannounced audit. So it kind of schedules with it. So you can expect that unannounced audit when you're kind of getting to the end of that certification process. So it will happen because they need to look at production. And again, within 15 minutes of walking on the floor, or within 15 minutes of walking in your door, they need to be on the production floor for BSI. I don't know how everybody else
I didn't know about that. I mean, what if there's something you can justify to say, we can't get you on the production floor in 15 minutes because of what?
If there's PPE and you got a bunny suit up and all that sort of stuff, they kind of count like the bunny suiting as that getting on the production floor bit. But if you're stalling,
they're just worried that you're trying to change some stuff over here. So
absolutely.
Wow.
Because
okay.
really, and you know, I work for a consultancy. I'm not part of a notified body. I don't work for the government. I recommend you have battle stations, right? So when an auditor walks in, it doesn't matter who it is. You all look at different things and you get things settled. One battle station should definitely be your inventory. Is everything looking nice and clean? Is everything lined up? Can you see green stickers, whatever your stickers are, whatever they are? Can you see them all the way down the line? Is your environmental control being done? Did they look at your temperature? Your non-conformance is closed, your cap is closed. Get those closed as quickly as you can. You know, there's a couple of things that you can kind of battle station out. It depends on who you are. I could tell you horror stories. You don't want to hear them, but I could tell them to you. So that kind of stuff, though, is where you want to go. Like, are your cleaning logs complete? Right. I mean, crazy stuff like that. Do you have enough lab coats for everybody? You know, just there, you could definitely assign different people to do different things for that. So there's that. So I didn't leave you a ton of question time, and I apologize for that, but here's my contact information. I get my emails regularly. If for some reason it's blocked, I apologize. Get through Greenlight and they'll contact me. But we can help you. I can answer questions for you informally, no problem. If you have, thank you, Yazan. He said I was amazing. If you have a project, give us a call. Obviously, we're very familiar with Greenlight Guru. We have gurus on staff, and we've implemented a lot of different systems. We know how to do that for you, and we know how to make it right for you. I know in the IVD space, it's a little different. And so it's different than medical device. And so there are some things you got to know. And if you grew up in medical devices or pharma and you're new to the IVD world, there are some differences. Don't make life hard on yourself is kind of usually what it is. There's a lot more forgiveness in the IVD space by risk alone, right? I mean, you know, the IVDs are so much less risky most of the time. There's our high risk, I grant, but most of the time, most IVDs are a lot lower risk. One more thing to add, since we are in the COVID pandemic loveliness, at the moment, the MDC, I can't remember their name now, MDG, all right, sorry, the consulting group, MDCG, I think is what it is, had published that COVID right now is a life-threatening disease and is a Class D device. Just in case that slipped anybody's attention, that is huge. Do they know how to handle Class D devices yet? Not really, but it is still a Class D device. So if you're planning on going into the into the EU, plan for that. I do think when the world decides that we go back down to endemic, which I think we're in the process of, but what do I know? I don't have a crystal ball. I do believe it will be down classified back down where it should be, in my opinion. But for the moment, it is a Class D product. Wowzer. That's a lot.
Yeah.
If you got to do that. Now, if you already submitted, I mean, sorry, if you're going to count that as a legacy device and you have it out there as self-certified, good for you, because you can ride that out until 2025 if it's still a Class D, 2026 if it moves down to C, 2027 if it goes down to B. Depends on where all that goes right now. But it is considered a Class D product for the moment. That's a lot. That's a lot to consider and a lot to deal with. So, and I know, you know, if you've got a lateral flow OTC device, right? It's like, oh my God, that's really high. It's a lot to deal with. So if you need help with that, we can help you. And if you need help with anything, definitely give us a buzz. I know I'm not giving you a ton of time for questions. I tried to answer them as we went through. If anybody has anything, feel free to throw them up there or to contact us after the fact.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say, if anybody's got anything, put it in there right now, because I know we're getting at time essentially. But man, Joanne, that was awesome. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks.
And really with that, you know, that concludes our Global MedTech Regulatory Trends Virtual Summit. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being part of it. I've learned so much as somebody who used to work on IVD. And honestly, I always just said it's a medical device, right? But you know, you got to think of it, you got to look at it different ways. So appreciate all of you again for taking the time to come here with us, learn and grow. Yes, thank you. It was very fun listening to it. Again, thank you so much, Joanne, and to all of our speakers and sponsors. For those of you listening, remember to log in to Greenlight Guru Academy, your free Academy account, receive your certification for the lessons, and then feel free to share that on LinkedIn or, you know, any of your networking that you want to do. And again, thank you for this, Joanne. It's been a pleasure. And
Thank you.
yes, I agree. This was the best webinar. I didn't even do anything. You were great. You just, the energy is amazing, but thank you so much. And yeah, you guys all have an amazing rest of your weekend, Labor Day, if it applies to you. Yay. And see you all again later.
Yeah, good luck, everybody.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.